original. Okay. We're holding in the laws of chapter 80 and the laws of Shabbos. Hey, Rebecca. So we're holding chapter 80 in the laws of Shabbos. It says like this. Asr litzboa shum davar. A person is not allowed, hey Aaron, a person is not allowed to dye or paint anything on Shabbos. Afilu b'tzeva she'enim eskayim, even if you're going to use a substance of dye that is not permanent, is forbidden on the Shabbos. Therefore, therefore, a woman is not allowed to put makeup. The tzvoa means to color her face, which would be makeup. And also, one has to be careful if your hands, let's say you peeled an orange or something that puts a color on your hands. So it says, if your hands are colored from peres she'achal, from fruits that you've eaten, like a pomegranate or an orange, something that gives a strong dye, don't touch your clothing, especially to dry them, because by doing so, you color your clothing. Hold on, Rebecca, let me just finish the law. It's a short one. By putting your hands on your garments when they are stained with the fruit juice is going to color your garment. Also, one has to be careful if you have a nosebleed or if something's bleeding, if you have a wound that's bleeding, the blood will color your garments. Don't use a towel to or a handkerchief, something that's going to put on the blood, because by doing so you're going to cause coloring of that substance. Okay, Rebecca, go ahead.
So if the problem is a woman putting color on her face, then would clear makeup be okay? Like concealer, foundation, cover up, like that clear lip gloss, that kind of thing, with no color?
Interesting. I have to check into that. That's a good question. What have you heard about that?
So women who are like really careful about halacha use Shabbos makeup, but I'm not sure why. Like I know with the powder,
Please tell the class, what is Shabbos makeup?
okay. So some Shabbos makeup is like it stays on for like a very, very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's made so that it lasts for like 48 hours or whatever, so it lasts even on Yom Tov, but often I don't know, it's like weird. It kind of looks weird, so like I don't know, I don't like to use it. There's
You're applying, sorry for cutting in, you're applying it, to be clear, you're applying it obviously
before
before the Shabbos on Friday.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, and then there's other things like, for example, like I think there's things you can apply on Shabbos. Like, for example, there's like lip color that's like a powder, and somehow Rabbanim allow for like I guess you're not allowed to use a pressed powder, but if it's already like if it's not pressed, if it's loose, I think maybe you are allowed to put like there's some makeup that looks like makeup, but Rabbanim allow for it to be applied on Shabbos. There's like blush that's like a kind of powder that like you are allowed to apply on Shabbos. I don't know exactly how it works, but I was just wondering about clear. I guess I could look into it further.
I will. That would be great if you could look into it and get back to us on the group. I'll also at the same time look into it on my side
Okay.
as far
My
as.
understanding is that like if powder, you can't take like pressed powder that's like packed into a thing and like separate it and loosen it and put it on your face. But if it's already loose powder, my understanding is that you can put that on. But I was just wondering about like liquid foundation and things
So,
like that.
so the thing is like this, that in what we're describing as different ways. Barbara will get to your question in a second. Different ways of applying face wear. You have, like you said, the compact powder. So by breaking its tochen, that's not just an issue of applying the color, so to say, but it's also the issue of breaking up the powder, so that's causing a tochen, it's like grinding something. So that's also on Shabbos, and this is especially nothing to do with food. Another thing is let's say the lipstick, you have the pasting it, the smearing it. Even if you would have clear lipstick, that could possibly be a problem because of how it's being applied. So there's two things here. There's the coloring, but what the law 42 is dealing with is the color aspect. But there could be other aspects of concern, like you said, the powder, of breaking the powder from a solid, like a harder powder to
Yeah, packed
loosening
in.
it. That's a problem of tochen. And then you could have a problem also of the smearing. That could be a problem as well.
Right. What
So
about Vaseline, like dabbing, not smearing it, but like dabbing Vaseline on
yeah,
someone's
well,
lips? Is that allowed?
that should be allowed. After, but I don't want to say anything without confirming.
Okay,
These are all
thank you.
excellent questions. Barbara, you're on
Yeah,
mute.
yeah, I'm sorry. Uh, so in other words, so we would on Shabbos, we shouldn't wear any kind of coloring on our face. And I know I've seen powder in the store, which is loose powder. But here again, you'd have to really kind of dust it on your face more than anything else, I would think, than just, smearing it on, applying it like, you're putting it on with like a sponge or something, because there's makeup sponges and stuff.
Yeah, so those are all part of the concern. But I'm going to give Rebecca some homework. First, she's going to investigate on unclear. Hold on, Aaron, unclear makeup, and then she's going to give us a more thorough explanation on the ruling of the powders that are used. So Rebecca, your homework is cut
Oh
out.
my goodness. Okay.
But
You're
Barbara,
gonna find us kosher makeup, Rebecca.
should
Well,
make
that
it.
I could do. I could post that in the chat. There's like,
Okay.
because I read these Jewish magazines that have ads for Shabbos makeup, so I could do that.
Okay.
That's
So
easy.
thank you. And Barbara, I just wanted to clarify that what Rebecca was asking and what we're talking about over here in the law. You just your wording. I want to make sure that your wording wasn't meant the way I heard it. Meaning to say the issue is not to have makeup on Shabbos. The issue is to apply makeup on Shabbos. So therefore, Rebecca was saying there are types of makeup. I remember my sisters when it came out in the 90s or the early 90s. My sisters were all excited. My older sisters of its use. And I remember that the issues that Rebecca's having with it, my sister felt uncomfortable after using it the first time because it looks like you just put on the makeup. So if they came out with this kind of lipstick or other makeups that remain as if you applied it today on the face, so it looks like you've placed makeup on your face, but it has a little weird look or feel to it.
Yeah.
The issue is not the having the makeup on your face. It's the issues of applying the makeup. So, Barbara, to your statement of you're not allowed to have makeup on Shabbos, you could have makeup as long as it's been applied before the Shabbos.
I'm just not sure I could wear something for 48 hours like that.
Yeah, and also there's obviously chemicals there. I think
Yeah.
I think the focus was more on the halacha, maybe less on the FDA approvals
You're
of
right.
And
Yeah,
I'm not
that's true.
sure.
chemicals being used.
I'm not sure if you can remove it either. I'm not sure if that's allowed on
No.
Shabbos. It's
Yeah, so
probably not.
removing is not allowed on Shabbos, but even after Shabbos, it could be that something that's not pleasant to take off.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's see the foot. Oh, Aaron, go ahead,
Yeah,
Aaron.
so you mentioned about grape juice and bloody noses. So you have a tissue. I'm
Grape
going to
juice.
make two statements. You have a tissue. You have a bloody nose. What are you going to do? And number two is, because it happens with my son a lot, even today, and he's 21. You spill grape juice on your shirt. What are you going to do? Not saying you would wash it, but I'm saying it stains it, and bloody noses stains the napkin.
You're not allowed to, if you spill grapes in the shoe, you're not allowed to take a napkin and start like dabbing at
Right,
it.
we know that, but I'm saying it did stain it. So did you create a
My wife will tell me that I'm violating the Shabbos weekly because I can't keep the wine in the cup when I make Kiddush. So every time I make Kiddush, it spills, but it's not intentional. I try. I mean, I'm not looking. It's definitely, see, there's let's say the whole thing is not straightforward, right? It's not the straightforward violation is what you would call the biblical description of coloring is you like painting a house, right? So
Right.
you're looking to paint the house. Over here, we're talking about no one who opens an orange and puts them on their white shirt is looking to color their shirt orange. You're not happy with that. You're doing it just naturally, and you regret it the second afterwards, right?
Yep.
But but you have to be careful because it doesn't change the fact that you're actually coloring the shirt. So definitely, it's not a there's no kavana, there's no intention, it's not there's no machshava over here that you're looking to color. So and especially here when you're holding the cup of wine and you have a white tablecloth and your hand shakes, God forbid, or whatever it is that happens, and it spills. People spill all the time. If I remember correctly, by the Rebbe's Farbrengen, there was a lot of spillage over there. If I remember, maybe I'm saying wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of Kiddush of kosher lebracha matzah yom tif. But definitely I do that on a weekly basis. But my hand sometimes shakes, and the wine Chabad we spill the wine over the cup, so it's not unlikely for stainage to happen. I have to be more careful. But that I have no intention and no interest, and also I'm not happy for that. Right? There's a lot of things that you're not happy for doing. The Torah, for instance, talks about certain things that people do that are out of anger. So you say you didn't do anything wrong, you didn't do something positive, you're not happy, but the fact that your anger went away, that you're happy about. So let's say destroying something, like breaking something on Shabbos because you're angry, so though you didn't want to break it, but your anger relaxed by doing that, so that could be something that's forbidden on Shabbos. But here, there's no involvement in that. So just by mistake of spilling grape juice on your shirt is again, there's no intention there. So it's not even like a shogeg, something you did by mistake, because it's not really a malacha. Nevertheless, one should be careful.
Okay, but let me just say, okay, some people have told me this. You're supposed to fill the cup until it's overflowing, and that shows that you have great respect for Shabbat / you don't look poor. You look like you have enough money to have a great Shabbos. And so you should pour it to overflowing. We have a plate underneath the Kiddush cup to make it look more fancy and catch all the drippings. But nevertheless, my son still has a way when he's doing the blessings to spill it everywhere and color up the table and or his shirt. But my other question is how do you deal with a bloody nose if you're going to color something?
Okay, so again, first of all, number one is if you have to apply something, it's always better, like we learned before, not to apply a white
Oh, okay,
handkerchief.
got you.
So you have a colored red handkerchief. It's different because then it's not you're not dyeing it with other. So that's number one. So you're not using a white thing. Number two is obviously try to do the best you can. But if it's out of control, it's out of control. You have to do what you have to do. But to apply a colored one is obviously is the way to go about dyeing something white. All right, let's see the footnotes over here. 146. 146 says about makeup. This constitutes a rabbinic prohibition according to most poskim. The Bahag, which is also an authority of halacha, rules that it is a deiraisa. It's not rabbinic, it's biblical to put makeup on. Number 147, even to darken previously reddened lips, means your lips are already red. So you're saying it's already red. So I'm just adding a little touch up. So I'm not coloring anything. Is prohibited according to the Yerushalmi Maseches Shabbos, page 7 to 7 second side. Okay, 148 is talking about wiping with a handkerchief. Shulchan Aruch 328:48 says this should not be done as an initial act, Magen Avram, but if there's no satisfactory alternative, you may be lenient since it is the way of soiling, not dying, right? Like I said before, you're soiling it. You're not happy about it. So therefore, again, that answers your question about if you can't do anything about it. So you're soiling the napkins. You're not dyeing it. So it's again, the prohibition here is the painting, the applying something for a positive. Here it's a soiling, so it's not the same thing. See Kitzur Shulchan Aruch 91:11. We'll get there hopefully when we finally finish chapter 80. All right. Now about dyeing of foods, right? We want to put in certain ingredients together. What about that? So it says ein litain karkoim l'toich hatafshu b'mpnei shetzayve. You cannot apply saffron into your cooked food because it's dyeing it. And this is quoted from the Chaye Adam. Let's see footnote number 150. The Shulchan Aruch, however, and most poskim say that there is no prohibition against coloring food on Shabbos. However, you may not color water for decorative purposes. Meaning to say, this is a good question because you have a lot of this. Saffron is one thing, but you have the yeshiva boys like mayonnaise and ketchup, right? So here you're putting together mayonnaise, which is white, with ketchup. So then you could equate that. The difference is obviously saffron, you could say, is just, so to say, coloring, whereas mayonnaise and ketchup are just mixing two substances together. So you're not coloring something, you're just mixing two ingredients. So that's different than putting in a powder of saffron that causes the whole dish to change. So you could say that's already a difference. But let's say putting in liquids, color into water. But then again, so the question is how much is it of a mixing of substances and how much is coloring? But at the end of the day is the Shulchan Aruch, we do have footnote number 150 that says that the Shulchan Aruch, and most poskim say there's no prohibition on food, although one should be careful on water and Shabbos. Let's say some people like to have, let's say, flowers in a colored water versus white water, clear water. So that's prohibited on Shabbos. Okay, we're going to
wait. So can you? So, like, my parents-in-law like to make rose water, and that might color it slightly. Is
rose water? You mean roses floating in the water?
No. In the Middle East, they use actual flavored water that tastes like roses if they were edible roses, but it tastes like it. They take the essence out of it, whatever. But could you color it just slightly, or
is it something for food or something for a design?
You could put it in food. You could put it in your drink.
No, it's something that you consume. It's not something that you just leave on the table.
Oh no, it's food.
Okay, so based on number 150, on footnote number 150, that quotes the Pri Megadim, the Mishnah Brura, that say that anything food related is not a problem.
So you're saying is, let me just get this straight. Kool-Aid, which definitely colors your water. That's okay.
Kool-Aid, or anyone who grew up in the 80s, instant using concentrated oranges, apple juice, all that stuff is the same idea, right? You mix water with the juices.
Correct.
Or in Israel, there's a fantastic drink called Petel, which is probably closer to saffron. I mean, it's not. It's this colored substance. So yeah, all these. So the question over there would be if it's coloring food, but based on what he's saying here in number 150, it's not an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome Ariel and Danny. Okay, let's go a little further. So Aser likloya oy lishtar afilu shnei chutin oy sa'aris hatlushais. It says forbidden to braid or weave even two threads or two loose hairs on Shabbos. So loose hairs, it says. So you're not allowed to braid on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to put together even just two threads. That's that prohibition. And he says in footnote number 151, waving threads is a melacha ta'iraisa. This is not rabbinic; it's biblical. But that's threads. But waving here is rabbinical prohibition because that's not.
So what about the Hasidic payas? You sometimes see the people wrapping it around their finger to make it look nice and neat.
But curls and braids are not the same thing.
Okay.
All right. Haderech, but in general, people are very careful on Shabbos not to use. Like we spoke with Rebecca was talking about the Shabbos brushes, about the brushes that could pull out here, which we're very careful on Shabbos. This is a bit of a complicated halacha because we're going to talk about the laws of making a tie, right? So are you allowed to make? Is a man allowed to make a dress tie on the Shabbos? And how would that be different than a bow tie? Okay, Haderachu. So the Shulchan Aruch says like this: Haderachu kishetzrichen likshor eze davar. Okay, one of the laws of Shabbos is to make a knot. You're not allowed to knot on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to release a knot on Shabbos. The question is, what's defined as a knot, and what type of knots were they making in the tabernacle? So he says, Haderachu kishetzrichem likshor eze davar b'shnei chutin oy meshichais. When you want to tie something with two strings or ropes, Oy shemisavivin chut, oy meshicha achas v'koishin shtei ktavos yachad b'derech hagura, or if you take one string, so there's two strings or one string, or two ropes and two ropes or one rope, and you tie it together at the two ends kederech hagura as a belt, right? So today we have belts that are not done in knots. We have belts that are done with the metals, but in those days it was done by knots. But you have also gartel, and you have a lot of women, part of their dress is to have a kind of a belt that ties in a knot around, or a bow around their waist. So are you allowed to do that on the Shabbos? So he says again, so that says like a belt, we tie a double knot, because he says in such a case, he's pointing out that traditionally, when you tie a belt in such a way, we double knot it. Why? Because one knot doesn't hold. But Shabbos, you're not doing it for Shabbos because a double knot is a strong knot. Even if it's regular, meaning it's the customary, to double knot it, to untie it, by on that same day. Meaning, what's the indicate? What are we pointing? We're going to see there's a lot of elements to this law. So then I should have put together a chart for this. But there's by making a double knot, you're making a very strong knot. By having it done in such a way that it's typically undone in the same day, means it's not a kesher shal kayama. There was never intention for this knot to remain, because everyone knows that these type of knots, let's say a belt, right? No one's staying belted and typically overnight. You undress at night, so you release the belt. So it's regular to undo the belt that day. So it means there was never an intention to make a kesher shal kayama knot that's everlasting. So maybe there's a reason for leniency, because it's a knot that will be done that same day. So he says, even if it's something that's regularly undone that same day, one should not do it. He says, and we'll see the footnotes on all this before we ask questions. And one should not even be careful of double knotting the what's it called? Not a shawl, scarf, right? A neck scarf. So you have a scarf. It says the word haltzuch, which is the neck. You have to be careful on Shabbos when you wrap the scarf around your neck on Shabbos. Don't do it in a way that you're double knotting. Even if one says, okay, I will put on my belt before Shabbos. Don't double knot it. Then you're not going to be able to unknot it when it comes time to take it off, because there's a prohibition of knotting and not unknotting as a separate prohibition. Even to make a double knot at the end of a rope or a thread is prohibited on Shabbos. Again, the double knot makes it a more permanent knot. Or like what do they call it? And it's not called a scout's knife, a scout's knot, but to take the two threads together like this and wrap them together and put it is also a problem. So the also again, to take the two threads together and to double wrap it and to make a double knot is prohibited. What's the problem here? So he explains. Because in such a case, he says, he says that when you're doing it on a single, okay, so until now we talked about double knotting two sides. But if you're going to take a single thread and make a single knot at the end, that itself is a very strong knot versus two ropes together. Therefore, also to take two threads together or two ropes together and together to make a single knot is a much stronger knot, and that's prohibited even on a single knot, not just a double knot on Shabbos. Why? Because then it lasts. So the problem is the lasting. By making an everlasting knot, makes it complicated. Again, this is a lot of laws brought into a very, very condensed law. But there's a lot of issues over here. We have the issues of the expertise. Are these expert knots or amateur knots? Is this a professional knot, like a scout's knot? But the fundamental questions over here is, as long as it's a kesher shel kayama, it's an everlasting knot. So double knotting on Shabbos is prohibited. And even to use, so for instance, if your method of a scarf would be to not tie it the two ends together like that, which one little wrap is not a problem. It's the double wrap is the problem, the double knot. But if you were to take the two ends of the scarf together and then wrap them and make a single knot, that would be prohibited as well. That's also a style that one should not do on Shabbos. Why? Because it's miskayim. V'lasis b'shtei k'tzav v'zeh mizeh v'kesher echad v'alav. No, I said, well, now he says something else. V'lasis shtei k'tzav v'zeh imzeh kesher echad v'alav aniva. So what about if you make a tie? To take two ends and to make a tie, not to make like a bow tie. Then with a single knot and loop on top. So he says in such a case, then it's not a problem. If it's something that usually gets undone the same day. I just want to make sure I fully understand this scenario. It is permitted to take the two ends together and tie them with a single knot and a loop on top of it, if this is something that's usually untied in the same day. I understood when I learned this to be a bow tie, because he said before, similarly, to make even one knot at the end of a string of rope, or to hold two ends together and make a knot, one knot with them, is forbidden. I see. I think maybe I was wrong about the scarf. I think the prohibition of the taking the two ends together and wrapping it together, making a knot, would be if there's just a rope to get there's a rope and you're not creating a loop. But I believe that a scarf by definition is a loop because it goes around your neck. So that's the loop. And then if you took the two ends together and put it in a single knot, if it's something that you would undo in the same day, it's not a problem. So I think I have to walk back what I said about the scarf making two sides together, making a single knot, because the loop would be the part that's around your neck. Okay. So but only if that's something that you would undo typically at the end of the day. And it's not something you would typically undo, but at the end of the day, it's prohibited. So the same thing would be not just about a scarf. Same thing would be about a waist belt. That if you were to take the two ends together and not tie it in a single knot, but the two ends together make a single knot that way, although it is a stronger knot, but because the part around your waist is the loop. So v'im lav aser. I'm assuming that would be the way what they're saying is even if you yourself say I want to undo it at the end of the day, but it's not typically undone at the end of the day, it's still prohibited. But to make two loops, one on the other, is permitted, and it is permitted to make even many loops, even if it is intended that they remain many days, because loops is different than making knots. Okay, any questions before we go to this is not super simple, but it's basically the prohibition of knots. Any questions on this before we go to the footnotes? Okay, so let's see footnote number 152. Again, the question, the halach, when it comes to a tie, I just want to say, when it comes to a man's tie, so let's say it's not believed that the tie is a proper knot. It's very loose. It's not, so like the regular typical way of making a tie, like the Windsor knot. So these are allowed on Shabbos, according to most opinions. It's permitted on Shabbos, but Chabad does have the concern of still being a little strict, and people should prepare the tie before Shabbos and lightly undo it and tighten it on Shabbos, in a lighter way. So it's you're not making the knot on Shabbos. The knot's already made before Shabbos. So if you'd make it, let's say Friday night before you went to synagogue before shul, and then just undo it, loosen it, and take off the tie Friday night and put it back on Shabbos day. If you want to use the same tie, that's better. That's a better choice than to redo the tie of Shabbos day. In being lazy, sometimes just leave my ties for a while in knots, and I could put them on and off for weeks or months at a time. I'm not sure, maybe that becomes a kesher shel kayama, that becomes an everlasting knot because I never take it out, but that's just me being lazy. Okay, 152, he says like this, according to the Mishnah Berurah, something that is tied Friday night and will be untied on Shabbos during the day is also permitted, because if it's less than 24 hours, it's considered the same day. So the Mishnah Berurah adds, it doesn't have to be specifically that you did it after Shabbos and within Shabbos you undo it, but if you do it within 24 hours, it's also not a problem. 153, he says, within 24 hours again. 154, he talks about you may make a loop or loops over a single tie if you intend to untie it that day, which is basically a bow tie, right? So you do a single knot, and then you make a bow. So to make a bow over the bow is also permitted. So basically, if I understand this, what he's saying over here, would mean, can you double knot your shoelaces on Shabbos, right? You're making a loop, then you're making another loop when you double knot it. So it says it's permitted. Okay, any questions? If not, we will move forward from this law. All right, happy it's understood. So here we say, this is the rule. Anything that you're not allowed to make on Shabbos, even if it was made before Shabbos, even before, after, or before 24 hours, but if for whatever reason the halacha says, well, when this knot is not permitted on Shabbos, then you cannot undo that knot on Shabbos. Also, even if you didn't make it on Shabbos, or if you made it on Shabbos and you violated the Shabbos and you want to undo it now. However, makam tsar, yesh lahata de nehudi. If there's pain involved, then you could ask a Gentile to undo the knot on Shabbos. If very necessary, it may be untied by a non-Jew. I guess what he's adding is the very necessary. Okay. Law number 47. Derech hachayotim shekoidim shetoifim mesabeget keroi mecharm esachatiches betfiras miruvachais. Tailors have the custom of making what's called tailor's stitches, which are not the final stitches, but kind of just to put the garment in a certain setting. They will make broad stitches before they finalize it, and then they'll undo the broad stitches once the final stitching has been done. And after they've done the final stitching, they will undo these tailored stitching, which are these broad, looser stitching. Let's say if you're hemming pants, right? So he may make a few, or she may make a few stitchings around to keep up the pants, and then under that or over that, whatever you have, she'll do the final, proper sewing, which is of course forbidden on Shabbos. And then after they do that, they will take out that string. Usually it's a different type of string that's easy to take out, and another color. Usually it'll be an off color, so they'll not forget to take it out. But what have you is that these are the stitches that are not meant for being permanent stitches. So what about using that on Shabbos? So he says, "V'asur la'asirim b'Shabbos." You're not allowed to take them out on Shabbos. So let's say you come back from the tailor, and you're getting dressed on the Shabbos, and you realize that the tailor forgot to take out the tailor stitches. So they're not real stitches, and they're loose, and it's a different kind of material. Can you just pull it out on Shabbos? It says no. So this would really apply to today men's suits. I mean, I'm familiar with men's clothing. I'm assuming this applies to women's clothing as well. A lot of times when you buy clothing, the label is also sewed on with a loose sewing, just for the label to stay on, whatever the label is, on the sleeve, on the cuff of the sleeve, and then usually one carefully removes it either by the tailor or themselves by pulling out those loose stitches. So that's forbidden to do on Shabbos. Footnote number 156. Completing a melacha, in this case tailoring, is a violation of the melacha called makeh b'patish, final touch of the hammer. So he says, what is the prohibition here? Even though you're saying this was never intended to be there and there's a loose kind of stitching, but you're actually fixing the clothing. That means that's the final act before the clothing are complete. after it's been tailored and everything's ready, you just have that final stitching that has to come out, and now it's ready. So that's actually a prohibition of Makav Patish, which is the final bang of the hammer, so to say, where the job has been completed. In this case, the tailoring or the making of the clothing. Footnote, we continue with law number 48. Begodim ha'asuim lahachnis ben meshicha oyritsuya. What about garments that are made so that a string or strap may be inserted in them, such as pants or shoes, or a robe, to use a new garment and to put in the ropes or the strings on Shabbos is prohibited. Because it's like perfecting. Now you're fixing, and now it was lacking. It's similar to Makav Patish. The clothing wasn't finished yet. Now that you've put in the string, it's the final touches for you to be ready to wear it. So that's prohibited on Shabbos. But what about an old garment? Im ein hanekev tsar shein terech lachnisan mutar. If the hole is not narrow, so there's no bother inserting the string. Let's say you need to change the shoelaces on Shabbos. So if it's in such a way that you have to really push open the hole on the shoe, it could be a problem. But if it's not doing that, it's just changing shoelaces, that's not a problem. But if it is bothersome to put in the string, it's not easy, it's prohibited. So, sometimes, again, the bachram have to put in the ends of the string and they don't go in well. You have to be careful with that. Footnote number 158. Obviously, we're not talking about belting on Shabbos, even new pair of pants, because even though he says ritzua in the chaluk in a robe, we're talking about that's like putting in the final garment to make it ready. The robe, usually most robes are the strings stay in the robe and remain there. But if you buy a new pair of pants on Friday or whenever you never wore it yet, right? And you put on the pants the first time on Shabbos, and you want to insert your belt, your dress belt, to hold up your pants on Shabbos, that's not like completing the garment. It has nothing to do with the garment. It's not really part of the garment. Whereas the belt on the robe is part of the garment. Okay, right? After most people, when they're finished wearing their pants, they'll take off the belt. You may put a belt through a new pair of, see, footnote number 58 is what I'm just talking about. You may put a belt through a new pair of pants, since you will not let it remain there. Okay, it's not like that's not like a robe permanently as part of the garment. So that's the difference between a robe and pants. So if you have a new robe, to put in the belt on Shabbos would be prohibited because that's how robes are. But to belt your pants, even new pants on Shabbos, is not a problem. Yes, yes, Barbara.
So my robe, the belt comes out. I mean, it slides in and out. So when I wash the robe, the belt's out. So I can put that in on Shabbos, or I can't. I mean, I'm not going to launder it on Shabbos, but I mean, if it were to come out on Shabbos, I could put that back in.
It's a good question about, but the questions, I think what it comes down to is when you're finished using the robe, let's say when it's not, what would you like? What you would, if you would like to keep your belt in on, and we're talking about a new robe. It's not talking about an old robe. We're talking about a new robe. So an old robe for sure is not a problem, that we mentioned. But a new robe they've never worn before, and your intention and desire is that the belt remains there as long as possible. If it does fall out, you'll put it back in, and possibly you'll wash it separately. Then you should better not do it on Shabbos. But if you're talking about a new robe, an old robe is not a problem. So most people's scenarios are they're dealing with the belts of their used robe. But if you happen to buy a new robe on Friday and you haven't yet put the belt inside the robe, you shouldn't do it on Shabbos, because your intention is usually belts remain in robes even after one wears them. The people don't typically like a pants belt. You don't take it off when you finish the robe. You don't take off the belt, right? And even some robes will have a light stitching to hold the belt in. Does that answer your question, Barbara?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay,
so
sure.
no, it just slides in and out. So yeah.
Yeah,
so
but the one that slides in and out by you is your old robe. So if it's an old
Right.
robe, that's not a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's do one or two more laws. Law number 49. So sometimes the stitch becomes loose and the parts of the garment become a bit separated. ומספר זה חתיכס קצת זה מזה. ומוישכים בחוט התפירה והם ההדקס ומסחברס. Let's say you have a stitching that's coming a bit loose, and all you have to do, let's say typically on the week, is you pull the stitch and kind of puts everything back together. Also, last game of Shabbos from the Havatoifa. That is a method of sewing on Shabbos, so you have to be careful. Footnote number 59. Safety pins may be used because they are not made to remain closed. See Shari Tshuva, Ginas Viradim, and the Taz. Some poskim say you may not draw the pin through 3 places, for it makes that like sewing d'Rabbanan. So it means you could put like a safety pin, just one in and close it, or some people kind of do it like a few times to make it more solid. That's a kind of sewing, even if the safety pin is a metal. So that should be not done on Shabbos. Okay, this happens all the time, right? Papers get connected on Shabbos. You open up your Siddur and Shul, and you see the Siddur, the 2 pages are connected. And that's obviously not the intention. They became attached unintentionally. So let's say it was not done, it wasn't done intentionally. This does not apply if the printing process was done wrong. In a way, sometimes you have papers that are connected, the cutting hasn't been properly, so you can't cut the paper. But sometimes there's ink, or through use, foods or wax. He doesn't say food because obviously it's disrespectful to eat food over the sefer, but that happens sometimes also. Or something sticky, whatever have you. But if the papers come together unintentionally, and it's not the intention to ever put them together in the first place, it just happened, it's permitted to open them on Shabbos. So that's something that happens all the time. So one knows, if you're in the shul, if that's what it is, again, if it hasn't been properly cut in the first place, and the pages are attached, and you want to rip the page, that is not permitted on Shabbos. If stuck together over a letter, you may not separate them, for it's like writing the letter. So here the Mishnah Berurah adds, you have to be careful where it is connected. If the letters, although he says there's ink that sometimes happens, that could be ink that's not letters, but ink that's a letter, that's a prohibition because you're creating the letter to be available. Number 161, but you may not cut open the page. Okay, that's what I said. If the page is, to use the scissors, you can't, but you could pull it open. That's not a problem. Okay, we're going to just read this law now and then open to conversation, but this law needs to be done again next week because of the questions of opening bottles before Shabbos, etc. Kelim shekarchu saviv pm b'matlis ukshur b'mashicha. Let's say the old, today it's less common, but today we have plastic covers or plastic tops. But those days if you had a jar, you would have a material over the jar. Let's say jelly. You could select fancy places buy the jelly. We have a material over the jelly, and you have a rope around the top of holding the material over the jar. So he says like this. If you have open vessels that were covered with a cloth and tied with a string, mutar lekarim b'Shabbos, is permitted to tear them open on the Shabbos, because you are spoiling. It's not a good way. Mutar l'tzarech Shabbos, and for Shabbos allowed to do it. So let's just see footnote number 62, and we're going to come back to this law next week. There are numerous details involved in this halacha. Okay, the footnote's already tackling the issues. There are numerous details involved in this halacha, and you should ask a posek. That's why he says, and we're going to do this again because there's a lot of questions here. If you have any doubt whatsoever, the main rules are, number 1, whatever may be opened must be open in a way that the wrapper, etc., cannot be used after opening. To undo the wrapper in a way that you could put it back on, that's not makalkal. You're not ruining it. You're not spoiling it. So then you have to use it in a way that it has to be immediately thrown out. Number 2 is you do not tear letters or pictures, because then you're destroying pictures and letters. That also you have to be careful. That's the questions of letters. So therefore today, for some reason, the manufacturers, I guess maybe by intention or not, have made very hard to open things without tearing letters. Let's say if you open your jar of Taster's Choice on Shabbos, so the jar opening is not the problem because that's usually not sealed. But the seal is that kind of silver foil on top, and that silver foil will have a lot of times a lot of letters over and over again saying taster's choice. So it'd be hard to rip without cutting letters, but you can use a knife kind of between, or if you don't use a knife, a fork kind of in between, get between the letters. So you have to be careful not to cut the letters. And therefore today, if you buy a cake on Shabbos and there's lettering on the cake, you can't cut a cake that has letters on Shabbos. You have to, today, if you go to a kosher religious bakery, they will put the frosted letters on a plate. That plate as a whole is taken off the cake. You may not, sometimes that plate could be itself a frosting, but still, this doesn't change the fact. Number 3, you may not open a bag on its seam. Again, because that's its proper way of Shabbos, because then it's not makalkel, you're not destroying. You may not open something in a way that will form a spout. So that's also prohibited on Shabbos. Okay, we're going to stop here with this law because I want to, like I said, like you see in the beginning of the footnote, there's a lot of details, and I'd rather bring up a chart with mentioning all the opinions of Rabbi Farkash, the halacha lemaisa, opening different bottles and things. So we'll get back next week. We'll start from law number 51. Any questions before we end the class? All right, excellent. So Laila Tov, everyone, and thank you for joining. And those we don't see before Shabbos and next week's in tomorrow night's class, have a wonderful Shabbos Nachmu, and a wonderful Tu B'Av with all its energies. Laila Tov, take care.
Thank you.
Rabbi. And Rebecca, remember your homework.
Rebecca, remember your homework, exactly.
Okay, I'll try. Thank you.